Hello everyone. Hope everyone's having a good day. Sorry I'm late. A lot of things happened. A lot of child herding, I guess is the right way to put it. Getting them everywhere on time. And also getting this stream ready on time because I was still scrambling to find all the assets that I needed in order to represent this. So this is going to be an interesting stream. We're trying a new format. It's going to be, instead of it being that we're looking at a dead mod, and then we have all of the baggage of a dead mod, and then like people coming in like, that's not actually how it was, and blah, blah, blah. Instead, I am going to be talking about a, from what I understand, young mod. This young mod is made by PUD. And I'm going to try to find them in the... Yeah, so if you see a chatter named PUD, that is them. They have been leading this mod development. And I have the lore document, which I am not ready to share and stream. And I'm not sure if they even want me to show it. But the most important stuff is this. So I'm going to take a screenshot of this, and I'm going to post it here. So the point of divergence of this mod is that the Soviets lose, and they lose early. They have a commander who had gotten serious wounds that instead of surviving them, they die, which I really like this point of divergence already, because it's something that feels like random chance, like beyond our understanding of how something could do. Like the bullet that the guy fired to shoot this guy hit him a little harder, or the medicine, the doctors couldn't find a way to stop the spread of sepsis. Regardless, this is really cool. And the consequences is that the spring offensive of the White Army gets Orenburg. Kolchak's forces make their way towards Moscow, capture it in May. Reliant on Moscow supplies, Trotsky defense, but Petrograd collapses. The White Russians mop up non-guerrilla Bolshevik forces, ending the land war soon after in mid-1920. But that's not all, because you can see here that there's a very big Poland, right? So I want to see if I can find a 1919 Eastern, wait, no, interwar every day, and there's a one that I like to use. I don't know if this is really accurate, but it talks about the this Eastern Front. So January, February, March, April. So the spring offensive, I'm not entirely sure when it was, and this map is probably outdated, but or like inaccurate. But you can see here, this is probably a lot less. Like I'm sure, surely the white movement's a lot more strong than it is depicted here currently. But the idea is that the Soviets suddenly lose a lot of momentum. This gets rid of Ukraine, I think, because the Soviets took over this area. I'm not entirely certain about that, but regardless, they managed to get to Moscow and then therefore Petrograd. The Soviets are attacking. I think they've already peaced out with Estonia at this point. They're still at war with Latvia, and Poland is currently fighting Lithuania. And because they know Eastern European history well, the Polish managed to capitulate Lithuania, which then leads to them becoming a governorate, like part of Poland but autonomous, right? And honestly, like, I think some Polish even were like, just call it Samogotia or whatever the heck it is, like the Samogotia. Samogotia is the Lithuanian name for this province, but I believe that this name is actually, I'm just going to show you what the Duchy of Samogotia. Oh, whatever. since the Grand Duke of Lithuania also held the title, okay. This isn't very relevant to this story and learning everything, but I heard that Polish people referred to Lithuanians as Samagotians and an extension of the Polish identity. I don't know how much that would actually be relevant to the stability of the state or the way it's organized or whatever, but I just thought I'd mention that. I don't remember how I learned that. No, it's not the Russian Civil War didn't happen. It's the Civil War is happening, and then there's a guy who loses. The Spring Offensive. So I imagine that the point of divergence is way earlier than the map that I found is. I would imagine that it's like the Spring Offensive of like 1919. This might be a better map. Pud might be able to clarify this. And I'm just going based off of a random month in a map that is potentially not historically accurate. So I'm just going to overwrite this. So here we have the situation before. I guess it is important to see this because the Poland is actually literally going into Lithuania. So the White Russians managed to defeat the Soviets. Samagotia? It's Samagotia because I am Canadian and I don't know how to pronounce all these ancient languages of the European continent. And I also have a learning disability that prevents me from learning languages, but that isn't really relevant and it's not an excuse. But I just like the better excuse is I don't know how to speak Lithuanian. Okay. But so Pod can probably clarify, but Lord is so lucky, he has so much to talk about and so many to listen. Yes, yeah, let's just take a moment of gratitude. I'm glad that I can do a stream of like 58 people and talk about timelines and people actually want to hear what I have to say. And I'm glad that I have a place to actually talk because it's really hard as a history fan, especially the like very specific neurodivergence that comes with looking at maps and seeing how maps change and how cultures and language and religion shapes history, and then not be able to share it with anybody. And whenever I talk to like my wife, Lore Mom is lovely and she's supportive. She cannot fathom any historical conversations. As soon as I mention any nation that she doesn't know or anything, she just like something in her brain just immediately switches off. I could tell her real history, but frame it as like Lord of the Rings lore. She might still have a problem with that, but like it could potentially go a little farther. But yeah, anyway, so I'm really grateful that you guys are here, and I'm glad that Pud and his team agreed to have me come and critique, pinpoint, whatever, offer suggestions to their project. Yeah, everyone here loves maps. Lithuanian is easy. That's crazy. Well, I mean, like the entire point of streams is that the streamer reads chat, right? Like, I'm not at the point where chat is moving at too fast of a speed for me to interact with my community. Sorry if you heard that. I tried to mute it. And the best part about streams like this and having the community talk about it together is that we can figure out like the best suggestions for my timelines have come from the community. But yeah, I noticed that Red, you've been just for a bit, you've been asking about the communist state. We'll get there. So the point of divergence is that the Soviets lose. And again, I'm going based off of this lore document. I'm just gonna get extra confirmation from Pud that I can show the lore document. I'll just message them directly. Can I show the lore doc on stream? So, because that would be really helpful if I could. What else we got going on here? Yeah, everyone must know where the commies are. To make it simple, and we'll get there, but it's Hungary. And I am a little about having Hungary be communist for a really long time and then surrounded by all these powers. Czechoslovakia wants this. If Ukraine existed, they would want this. Or what, if Ukraine was bordering Hungary, they would want Carpathian Ruthenia. Romania would want to round out Transylvania, because I'm pretty sure that it's there's some parts of Transylvania that's still occupied. Okay, so we've got consent to show the document on stream. So I'm going to go to Microsoft Edge because that is much safer for my security. And then going to change to Microsoft Edge, and that didn't work because it needs to there. Okay. So let me zoom in so everyone can read. This is what I was saying earlier. Point divergence is that a guy loses his life. Then it's just like that stream on the weekend where there was we had really good generals and they suddenly died, and then we lost. Right? That's the point divergence of Aquila. Kolchak's forces make it there and they win. Nation background: Mustache Man commits no life, which means that the Strasser brothers take the Nazi party and turn it into like a revolutionary, like, you know, that whole like beefsteak Nazism and revolutionary Nazis who didn't want capitalists and capitalist systems to continue to exist, and then Hitler had to put them down and reform the SA to the SS and all that stuff. I'm guessing that it's like this. So they managed to get a foothold in reactionary, but they joined the far-right coalition when the Civil War breaks out. So there's a German Civil War. SPD's Kiel conference in 1927, Offenhauser and fellow left-winger succeeded in their motion to refuse collaboration with bourgeois. The SPD doesn't like the government. Excuse me, I'm suddenly getting like huge allergies. Commie Nazis, no commie Nazis. I don't know who's saying commie Nazis. But there were, like, if you look up Ernst Röhm, like, this is real history, and I'm not trying to muddy any waters about the atrocities of Nazis when I'm talking about this. But after Hitler got elected, the SA under Ernst Röhm and several other figures wanted to do like a redistribution of private property or something. There was some ideological principle that was in conflict with Hitler's Nazism, and that's what led to the Night of the Long Knives. I think they killed Röhm, they killed the a Strasser brother, and a bunch of other people who they suspected to be anti-Hitler. And then they moved forward with Hitler's version of National Socialism. Yeah, Night of the Long Knives. So the people that died in the Night of the Long Knives are instead running the Nazi party in a different way, Black League, and they would have similar things where instead of having a corporate state where you still cooperate with the corporations, you instead dismantle everything and then redistribute it. They would still be doing all these other things that aren't good, but yeah, that's what that is. SPD doesn't the government. So basically a lot of infighting in Germany then leads to so other minorities in government opposition include the Black Front and the Communist Party, with wide support. So there's going to be a civil war in Germany. Black League, Black Front. During the Lithuanian-Polish War, Polish Army Lithuania capitulated. It was cut short by the Red Army invading. Yeah, that's true. During the peace treaty, Lithuania was to be integrated into personal union, setting the Lithuanian government. So what personal union? But that's the thing. Like, it's not a monarch, right? Like the personal union with the state. Regardless, like Lithuania is a part of Poland in this timeline in some capacity. After the White Russians advanced to the border, they began violating Poland's sovereignty, raiding and amassing troops. Eventually, it's culminating in the Russo-Polish War. The Soviets got close to winning, but it's not close. The disorganized White Russians are on the back foot as soon as the war starts. Poland allied with Ukraine, and this coalition managed to push the Russians out of Ukrainian and Belarusian regions. Eventually, Russia had decided to cease fire. So that explains the borders that include Poland having Belarus and Lithuania Ukraine having all their territory. Orenburg Independent Army. I'm going to look this up. What is this? Is a anti-Bolshevik army on the Eastern Front during the Russian Civil War. It was made up of Cossacks, which rebelled against the Bolsheviks. Alexander Dutov. Right. And Admiral Kolchak. Okay. So that helped. Siberian forces connect with the northern armies in Arkhangelsk. White forces reach Moscow. Yeah. What is this? So no, civil war finishes. Unstable provisional government forms after purging Bolsheviks. Elections start. Social revolutionaries win. Okay. Evil generals get mad because they refuse to acknowledge an SR-led government. Establish a military government. They endlessly bicker with each other. Stays unstable. Eventually, Dietrichs. I don't know who this guy is. This is a wide Belakun. This is a part that I feel is a little lacking. Like severely lacking in several different ways. And I want to try to entertain the idea because of the potential that comes with it. But I also feel like it's not that optimal. So, after the collapse of the Soviet government, several members of the Red Army seek refuge in the Council Republic. How would they get there? That's the first problem. How would these communists cross Polish borders to get to Hungary? I understand the obvious impetus of having it be like, these people are communists. They don't necessarily need to be loyal to any nation. They're loyal to the workers. So the ability for them to go into exile somewhere else and then continue the fight makes sense. And if Hungary was still around, that's the first place they'd go. Hostilities rise between Kun's government and the nationalist army due to the government's failure to restore the lands of the Crown Stefan. Following a success at the Czechoslovak front, a more paranoid Belakun, after witnessing the defeat of the Polish and spring offensive, decides against declaring the Soviet Republic in Preslav, not wanting to upset the nationalist elements of his army. But, like, that... What would that actually change, though, right? Like, I can understand that... And, you know, Lenin even sent a letter to Belakun that was like, don't look at what I'm doing and then copy it word for word. Like, the revolutionary elements of the Soviet Union, or the Russians, and the revolutionary elements of Hungary should be completely different and be handled differently. And Hungary declaring the Slovak Soviet Republic, emulating Lenin's model, would definitely upset Hungarians. I actually agree with that. I think when I read up about this recently, it turned out that the area that they set up the Slovak Republic was actually had a lot of Hungarians living in it. So, like, nobody actually wanted it. There's no leader. They just pissed everybody off. So that's a good point of divergence. Like, this logic is sound, but the plausibility of Hungary existing for this long is, in my opinion, not. Okay, avoiding disagreements with the Red Army, the Hungarians managed to keep their momentum and capture most of Slovakia, only be held back in Bratislava and Nitria in the south of the... Yeah. And also there's a lot more Slovaks, so they would actually not have a lot of people working together with them. After a failed Czechoslovak counteroffensive, the Hungarians and Czechoslovaks agreed to an armistice around the current front line, despite their disapproval of France. Like, this has to happen for Hungary to exist, but I don't know if this is actually the right thing to do. But like I don't know. Like there's a lot of elements about Hungary. After discussing the proposed new borders of Romania, Czechoslovakia, and Romania on the 20th of June, the council demanded Romania retreat from whatever. Romania refused to do so until Hungary demobilized. Despite French, Yugoslav, and Czech threats of invasion. Why wouldn't after one failed offensive where Hungary wasn't having to deal with Romania, would Czechoslovakia not go against Hungary right then? Like, the Little Entente was founded to contain Hungary. Yugoslavia had, like, the kingdom of Slovenes, Croats, and Serbs had claims guaranteed to them in all the post-war treaties that were Hungarian territory. The Hungarians would be resisting that. Why wouldn't the kingdom of do that? Why wouldn't France support that? After discussing the new borders, the council Hungary attacked the Romanian positions. R.L. Stromfield. Is this like a Russian, a Soviet general or something? Securing it in 17 days. 3rd of August, the Romanians, Czechs, and Yugoslavs failed to recapture. Like, yeah, Holy Larson chat when some of the heroes Strasser. Yeah, like commie Nazis aren't a thing. Like, chill out. Long signs and armistice of the constable. This is already a little hard for me because like I'm coming in to like offer suggestions. The only thing right now that I have is like Hungary not being able to actually do what they need it to. So I don't know what is actually supposed to be happening. Yes, Hungary is the only communist state as far as I understand. Intermarium. So people don't know this, or maybe they do when they saw Stresa. Pilsudski's first vision for what the Intermarium would be a union of states, like a Republic of Three Nations, like Poland, Belarus, and Ukraine, I think, or Lithuania, Belarus, whatever. Point is that it was supposed to be like a federation along the lines of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, but the name would be Intermarium, between the seas. So going up from the Baltic to the Black Seas, in between the seas. That state would then use as many anti-Russian forces as possible through the Promethean doctrine, contain Russia so that Poland and their fellow Federation members wouldn't be subjugated by Russia again. Shortly after the German Civil War, the Intermarium breakdown with Ukraine eventually go north against Poland. Poland loses the Belarusians for revolt for autonomy. Lithuania will break free. So this is good content. If the Poles win, Ukraine doesn't rejoin the faction, but their position solidifies. Yeah, Armenia, no war. Turkey, Treaty of Sevres. I know that like it's kind of a meme for Turkey to always suffer the Treaty of Sevres, but in this timeline, I think it makes sense. Turkey found itself encroached by foreign nations on all sides, the Kurdish and Armenian lands, the Greeks, blah, blah, blah. They managed to do that, but then because the Soviets aren't able to support the Turks, the treaty divided the Ottoman Empire into Levantine mandates, a Kurdish zone for a plebiscite to be held, a new Armenian state, an international zone of the Bosphorus, and gave the Greeks Thrace and Smyrna. We'll get there. So yeah, the Fengtiang. So the last thing to mention is that because the Soviets were involved in the organization of the Kuomintang, their capability to do the northern expedition is significantly reduced, and therefore they aren't able to secure everything. So let's go now to Photoshop. So that's all the lore, and that's why we get here, and that's why thanks to Pudge for making this. We have this QBAM. So we can look at this now and do some more discussing. Jokes about jokes about Nazis and different forms of Nazis are hereby going to be moderated. All right. So these states still exist. Stalin in Georgia. Yeah, maybe. Communist yeah, why don't we do communist Turkey? Yeah. A communist Turkey makes a little bit more sense, actually. And the reason why I would argue for a communist Turkey rather than a communist Hungary is that there's like semi-plausibility that there would be communists that would be able to get on boats and then go to Turkey. So the Soviet generals that failed in Russia could go to Turkey, right? This Turkey, like the way that Turkey was even starting to be organized and whatever, there were communists there. They just died in a boat thing, right? Then you have, instead of it being that the like Mustafa Kemal kept flirting with the idea of communism over and over and over and over and over again. That was because Soviets were like bankrolling the state. He wasn't really a communist. He just kept grifting so that the Soviets wouldn't do something like install a communist there. And it's very likely that when a bunch of communists were moving around on a boat and the boat exploded, that it was some sort of assassination that was to eliminate communism, right? In Turkey. If the Russians are, I guess the problem is that Russia and all these people, they'd be going up here, and then they would already be controlling this. So that's a problem. Maybe we have them just holding out here and then going there. I'm not entirely sure. But I think that it makes sense for a communist Turkey too, because if Turkey goes communist but signs the Treaty of Sevres, what do the British and French care? They just got their holdings secured. It doesn't matter that these guys are communists. Like, who cares? Woohoo, let's go get our tea now and enjoy our trade with White Russia through the Mediterranean. Like, I would say worth considering making Hungary not the communist state, but instead Turkey. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and LoreDatificate it. So this is Russia. So anybody who wants to make maps like me, this is how you do it. So you get reference. You then highlight a nation. You get a color code from a color scheme, but in this case, Pud's already given one for me. You make a separate layer for it. You fill it in. You have it here. And then you have it in a folder with a stroke effect that is 2 pixels. You can't see it, but there's a layer style window pop-up that shows up. I put it to 2 pixels so that the gaps between these things are like labeled as borders, and then when there isn't a nation, there's a clear divider between whether a nation is or isn't. If you try to make borders static and layer on top of each other, it's not good. You see there's a lot of conversation happening about communist state. Hungary can't be the only communist state. You know, actually, that's a good point. If you have Hungary and Turkey, maybe there's some plausibility there. And then there's even a weird, like, because I'm pretty sure Hungarians and Turks have like ethnic similarities. So the identity of communism could then be like Eurasian-ish, right? Like Russia already, there's like Russian Eurasians or whatever, but you could argue that they're more European than the Asians that they colonized. But the Hungarians came from the steppe. The Turks came from the steppe. There could be some weird like proto whatever about that. But let's continue adapting this over here. And the reason why I do it in separate layers is so that there's one part about it is that it's easier to edit later. But there's another part too where there's another part about it too where you can if I were ever to take this and try to edit it like a map I had in the past, then you know how I used to do projects. They'd have like animations. Oh, interesting. We might have an issue here. Thankfully no issue. We just need to take these 3 things and move it up a pixel. 1 pixel. There. Okay, that should fix things already. Mongolia. Why map has Rubinks Reservoir? Because we used a modern QBAM outline. And I will potentially look into fixing that, but yeah, just ignore any modern day Soviet redistributions, water canals, whatever. Like, yeah, just honestly a little bit of a low priority. So good. Hey, sorry, we got another Sevres timeline, but I think that this one actually makes sense. I want to make this Turkey a communist Turkey. So I'm going to open my color scheme. This is Skaldagram's unexpurgated color key, also known as suck. Then we can go into far left Turkey, and then we can, when we make Turkey, we can go Turkey. And then there. So then there's a communist Turkey, there's a communist Hungary. You know, I would probably even consider having Romania fall to some sort of communism, but I'm not too sure about that. I'll be right back. I need to get some tissue or something so I can clear my nose properly. I'll be right back. Hi, I'm back. So, let's read a little bit of a chat. Okay. Not sure Poland directly annexing Eastern Belarus, and they tried propping up a Belarus puppet state during the Polish-Soviet War in our timeline. I'm not entirely like that's a good suggestion, a good point. I'm not entirely certain about that though. I actually do a commie path for Fear Redux Turkey right now. Okay, cool. My idea got accepted. Congratulations. I thought too front ordered the premise is weak. Make France commie, so Germany forms a pact with Eastern European countries. But Germany falls to a communist revolution, or not communist, but like a civil war, which would include communist. And then the way you balance that, like having France become communist, there's a possibility there, but then it's like the San France thing, or you have like communists winning elections and then having that, like that's interesting. That could work. That might be interesting. And then it would actually it would be a good reason why the Little Entente can't suppress Hungary. If France goes communist, then instead of France supporting Hungary's destruction, France would be supporting Hungary's reconquest. But when France is in the earlier sections of the communist revolution, they wouldn't be able to really support Hungary. So then there's just like a peace deal, but then the problem is then resolved later. Having a communist France might actually be a good move to have here. It might mean that we don't have a communist Turkey, because having a communist France, Hungary, and Turkey, like it seems a little much, especially when you have a potential communist Germany. So there's France, Germany, Hungary. Like that's a lot of big nations to have to deal with. Romania, Hungary, Danubian Federation. That's kind of what I was thinking. What's overdone? Poland could annex Ukraine and attempt the intermarket. Yeah, maybe. Germany's democratic. It is, but it has a civil war. Okay, I'm losing track of chat. Communist Turkey can make it really anti-Islamo-socialist. Yeah. You don't need a Soviet Union for Turkish socialism. There were Ottoman Spartacists in the German Civil War. Really? Oh, that's awesome. Could you send me information about that? Because that could be good for Spartacus. France colony journey must be democratic. Please no San France. Yeah, no more San France. This would be Kaiserreich without the Kaiser. If you have a stable Weimar in alliance with the Polish and a war with the French, yes, it would be basically Kaiserreich. But there's also the hopefully this doesn't get copywritten, because I know that Toby Fox's music is copyright free, but I don't know about Insane the Rain. Anyway, this is a really good mix. So we have France. If you got France going communist, and then Germany having a revolt, and then Poland having a revolt, the war would then become basically Russia versus France, or Poland somehow beating Russia and then fighting France. Hungary being this, but I don't know. There's an issue here. Communist France has been overdone so much. Not really. If you have a communist France that isn't syndicalist and is actually like Stalinist, and like they do things like annex Algeria into France proper, that could actually work though. Like there's enough of a weird juxtaposition with the way that France would be acting that would cause enough of a weird world that you could actually have something to play around with, right? Seeing the communist waves would probably push much of the world the right wing. No, I want communist Turkey. Yeah, communist Turkey could be pretty good. Russian 3 Rome nationalism. That could be fun, actually. Just... Do you want me to... Yes, just send it in DMs if you could, please. Algeria was already directly annexed by France, but it wasn't like incorporated as a part of the metropole until 1937 or something, when the United Front, which had communists inside it, put forward the bill. There were some communists who considered Algeria as an integral part of France, even though it was a colony, an overseas colony. I don't see how France becomes socialist. There was so much. There's a lot of like French socialism that was happening in our history. It's not as outlandish as you think, and it doesn't even need to be a socialist revolt taking over France. It could be that a election has communists in favor, and then they coup the government, dismantle it, make a new republic, and suppress a lot of the white movement, and still have a bunch of colonies everywhere. Like, that's actually possible. So, I don't know. We're not having Nazbol, Japan. Franco-Algerian Socialist Commonwealth. Communist France and Communist Turkey would be interesting because you see France handing over its Arab lands to Turkey, allowing for some sort of communist neo-Ottoman state. You know, yeah, but it depends on what the Turkish national claims would be, right? Obviously there's like, oh, there's no nation of the worker. Yeah, whatever. There'd still be some sort of like what Turkey should have, and it would probably be like getting like revising a lot of the problems. But then if you have like a Leninist model where you're relying on nations, and or it's like Islamic socialism, then you have the potential for them to make a Azerbaijani socialist republic or whatever. And the Turan, if you want to do Turan, you could like just have them go all the way east. I think that we actually are going to go with the communist France. Seems a little crazy, but I think that this could work. France is communist that entered Germany in civil war. It's the same as. Hold on. People are starting to realize that I only have two ideas. Hold on. I want to go back here. I don't want to do just that though. I want the hour long. Okay. There's a lot of talk going. I can't keep up with it. Communist Italy and communist Turkey. It's not much. It's not. That's the same problem as having France, though. If we just make every nation communist, there's an issue. If you make Italy communist instead of France, maybe. Italy being communist would actually support the whole problem with Hungary having support, but the problem is that it was France supporting the Hungarian communist revolt, so it has to be France. So you have Italy going Mussolini fascism because communism right on the border. Full-blown communist France wouldn't fit the point of divergence. Why not? There's no Soviet Russia. The influence that Lenin has on the way that socialism develops could mean that other states have more communism. I think that does fit the point of divergence. It's obviously up to the to Pud and her team what they decide to do with this. But I don't know. I think that a communist France would actually be a good idea. Why wouldn't the Bolsheviks flee to Georgia? They're independent and socialist. They would. Yeah, so maybe we'll just have that then. What does the map here have? Well, the problem is that they're not the wrong kind of leftist, right? Let's see here. Eastern Europe, Caucasus, far left Caucasus country. Let's just make everyone communist, and then all of our problems are solved. Said everybody ever. I like having Georgia be communist because of Stalin memes, but also if the white movement was up here, it doesn't really work. Why is it always yes man? Because yes man is inevitable. The problem is that like fascism spawning when it does is so vital for the development of the right wing in the interwar that not having him show up can cause problems when you start to figure out who is the new right wing guy and what their ideology is and why. So that's often why I have Mussolini showing up. But there's so much chatting. This is crazy how much chatting's going on. I can barely keep up. I don't think like mostly was a royalist and was pro-Irish home rule. So that's a decent idea, but maybe not. Georgia could attack Russia in the Second World War to become maybe. Have the king signed Facta's military emergency, seeing the king Mussolini as destabilizing force as much to the left. Maybe. Why are we trying to make everyone a communist if the Bolsheviks fail to mean that Mensheviks are getting support? So France is a bastion of radical republicanism. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so I say France communist, but it wouldn't, yeah, you're right. It wouldn't be communism. It would be like left-ish. Having France be radical Republican just enough for it to juxtapose the nationalism makes me want to do something where we have this far left France, we put this over top, we do 50%, and then we wanted like 75%, wouldn't we? I don't know how color theory works. That's a decent color for France. So France isn't communist, but they are socialist, and their version of socialism is totally the right one, and anybody who disagrees is a fascismo. I'm gonna look at my old maps here. Other timelines. Go to our timeline 1936. Get France. Unclick France. Put it here and give it the vaguely communist colors. Does not look very good. Let's select all this. Make it this. Select all this, make it that color, but then go to this color and then make it brighter like this. That looks better. So vaguely socialist France. That's better. Full Soviet style doesn't make sense. There's always opportunity for the radical left to take over. Lower Dad is not a social democrat. Lower Dad's politics will always remain a mystery, but I promise I'm not a fascist. It's not like those right wing people who are like, oh yeah, I'm just vaguely right wing. It's like, no, I just don't want to bring my politics into it. Just straight up, like, let's just focus on the fun. Yeah. So thank you, Schizo Shroom, for the point that France would be like radical republicanism and like have that be part of their national identity. The right would be like, yeah, we're so Republican, bro, but then still have the whole element of it being that the French left, without being like told that they need to follow certain certain like ideological principles as outlined by Lenin, could lead to there being a bigger, larger left wing. Communist Hungary be the entire communist Austria-Hungary, and then sort of communism in Italy and the Balkans. That's very, very crazy, but maybe. Can I please do Victoria et an Alamo? I might. Why would we need fascism to exist in this world? Because then how do you define the rest, right? Like, it doesn't have to be Mussolini, but it is a lot more trouble to have to try to figure it out. Hello, what's the lore? I just hid the lore. Isn't it crazy that like immediately after you hide the lore, this is the main point of divergence. Yeah, White Russian victory. That's why I was so interested in this timeline. So yeah, France and socialism. What else is new? How does Poland have Belarus but not Western Ukraine? What's the lore? I would defer to Pud for that. I think that when the Soviet-Polish War of our timeline happens, but it's the Russians, it influences their decision to like be a part, like make an alliance with Ukraine to avoid getting subjugated by Russia, which then leads to Poland having a ceasefire. But then why don't they just establish a different a Belarus buffer state? But then if you set up a Belarus buffer state and then you want to do the Republic of Three Nations, you would then do a federal model with Lithuania and Belarus. So then you just have the exact borders here. So that's probably the lore. Fascism doesn't exist. How about it spawns in Russia? You know, that's actually a good point. You could actually have a fascist Russia. What is White Russia like? A military dictatorship, an oligarchic republic? I think that right now it's a military dictatorship. I could be wrong. Britain going military dictatorship, maybe. Poland own Masuria in a timeline like this. There's voted to remain Germany. Wouldn't Poland own Masuria in a timeline like this, since people there voted to remain in Germany mostly due to the plebiscite happening at the same time as the Soviet push to the Vistula? You know, that's actually a really good point. That's a good suggestion. I hope that there are Aquila Renata devs putting this down here. You know, there should be a Discord channel, a Discord link in the description of this live stream. I'm just gonna, you're gonna hear me twice because I'm gonna open up my own stream for a second. No, I was quick. And I want to copy this. If you guys check the description of this live stream that you're watching right now, you can go to the Discord channel. And I can't link it for some reason because what YouTube does to links is crazy. Yeah, so I've lost the plot on chat, so I'm gonna just quickly move on with what I'm doing here. So we can have Hungary become communist if France somehow has a radical shift toward the left that prevents them from intervening and like has pity on Hungary or something. Maybe in that case you could have Hungary still be communist. I don't know how that would be achieved, or if that's even plausible, or even if in the event that France has leftism, they would still want the Little Entente to not exist. Like, France would still be anti-Germany, but then like the cordon sanitaire of Poland, Ukraine, that like France, Poland, Ukraine being allies, yeah. Having the inciting incident have being like French communists securing the state and then avoiding cordon sanitaire could be a really good opportunity for Russia to march in. Maybe that's the inciting incident of the timeline. I'm going to continue to copy things over here so that we can actually talk about it. You know what I want to do? I want to start a Q&A. Ask questions about the timeline / offer suggestions. So this way the chat is a little more streamlined. Hopefully it doesn't cause a problem. Hopefully it doesn't cause a problem, because I remember the last time I used that feature, it caused a problem with like destroying chat or whatever. But if you guys go to the Q&A, that would be a little easier way for me to filter out exactly like what people's suggestions are, because people have, like, I see different people suggesting the same thing, but if it's all listed somewhere, hopefully it'll be easier for everyone to read. So I'm not the biggest fan of this Romania-Hungary lore, but there was a decent suggestion, and I like it, that we go with something like a Danubian Federation of sorts. I don't know if that would actually really be that good of an idea. There's also another thing that's important to note. Like, what is going on here? It's because I'm like filling in without isolating first. Right. Yeah, I've been doing that a lot. Okay. If Hungary takes Romania and Poland somehow doesn't intervene, it's like, yeah, if they're fighting Russia, sure, but like they're just gonna leave that forever, right? Like, the Polish-Romanian alliance existed in our timeline, and it would probably exist in this timeline too. Which then leads to the question, like, who's who and why. Who's who in the zoo? Let me see the Q&A now. Okay. Why do so many people want to change Britain? I don't think Britain should be changed. Russia established a parliamentary republic with open elections. Yeah, I agree. That makes sense. Croatian, Serbian, ultra-nationalist front to the Magyars. Yeah, like having a Yugoslav fascism could actually be interesting. And then like Slavic nationalism, like pan-nationalism could be the identity of could be a what leads to fascism in this timeline. That makes sense to me. And I know we have a thing of like making everybody communist, but Bulgaria working with Hungary in this situation makes sense, especially if Yugoslavia is a part of the Yugoslavia is part of the Russian faction and Romania is part of the Polish faction. The only people that would be really willing to revise the borders here would be communists. Maybe they're just something else. I don't know for sure, but there's a reason why I'm often resorting to the communization button here. It's not necessarily because I agree with it. This is why I thought Italian fascism, like Bulgaria working with Italy makes sense. Italy working with Hungary makes sense. Italy, therefore, being left makes sense, but it doesn't make sense at the same time. So I don't know for sure. When will France go communist? I think that, like, you could have an alternate crisis of, like, the railway strikes then being resolved by having a democratic election, having a socialists be elected, and the socialist umbrella in this timeline would be extremely big, because people like Marcel Déat, who were a part of the right wing of the Comintern, wouldn't be expelled for nationalism because Lenin didn't establish the guidelines of what a communist actually is. So you would have a lot of people falling under that banner. But then if there's the right wing there, they would still want to have cordon sanitaire against Germany. French nationalism is inherently anti-German. So I'm not entirely sure, basically, is the answer. Is Britain normal? Yes, Britain is normal. Give Poland one of German colonies. They wanted colonies in our timeline. Well, the problem is that the League of Nations would prevent colonies from being established out of people losing. Poland would want colonies, sure. You wouldn't be able to get a Polish colony if it would be like a significant thing. Finnish-Estonian Union, yeah, maybe. Honestly, that could be fun. If France and Germany go socialist, we could have a French-German alliance, which Nomad does, and be interesting. Yeah, you know, I would actually, I think that'd be interesting. If you extend World War I by a few months, the SFIO would have won in France. Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Democratic Socialist / left-wing leaning USA? Could be. Russia should be fascist? I agree that Russia should be fascist. Maybe there might be a non-international socialist state in Bulgaria. They would lose more. Yeah, sure. I feel like we don't need communist Hungary. It only see it working with the USSR being near Hungary or Germany. I sort of agree. But Hungary being here to mess stuff up is really interesting too. So I'm not entirely sure. Right-wing Slavic nationalism in Yugoslavia, Poland, Ukraine, and Czechoslovakia, with all going somewhat towards the right. Bulgaria also goes commie. I thought that we were going to have Russia and Yugoslavia against Polish, Ukrainian, and that's like the Slavic Civil War or whatever you want to call it. This block of three big nations here, and then even Czechoslovakia. This is like basically France's like, I love you, be a buffer state to my enemies block. So you'd want to have France would want to have this, even if they change their identity a bit, they'd want to have this. Yugoslavia got benefit from France, it would be a part of the cordon sanitaire. But you could argue that Italy getting land off of them would be enough of a detriment. Maybe they have claims on Romania because of the way that the Hungarian-Romania War happened. I'm not entirely sure. But having a potential alliance between... It would be more likely for Yugoslavia to have an alliance with Russia than they would France, even though France was one of the main benefactors of Yugoslavia. In fact, Yugoslavia was supposed to not ever exist. It was supposed to be the kingdom of Slovenes, Croats, and Serbs. They specifically chose that name because Italy didn't want the Slovenian lands to be, or any of the other lands that are part of a Yugoslavia to be claimed by Yugoslavia, but they did it anyway. So Yugoslavia is already inherently kind of like anti-West in a way. So having it go Russia makes sense in my mind. Czech Togoland, I wouldn't actually mind that. Even if the Togoland is like a Czechoslovak mandate of Togoland, like why not, right? Italian Civil War, maybe, but Germany already has a civil war, so then what's happening in Italy? Does the Treaty of Warsaw between Poland and Ukraine still happen? There's a possibility of a different Ukrainian border. I'm not entirely certain what that happens there. France and Italy stress up front to keep Austria independent. If France and Italy are united against a Germany that has a civil war, that's not that good of a balance. If France and Poland have Germany and Poland have civil wars, France can then revise Germany somehow, either by propping up an ally or something else. Austria in Italy's sphere makes sense. Having it's just so easy to have a fascist Italy, right? But you don't need to have a fascist Italy to have a Austrian buffer state. It just so happened to be that Metternich wanted to be like his big daddy, Mussolini. I don't know. There's a lot to consider here. And ooh, that is like the exact same color. Okay, let's get a different Austria color. I don't really like this color for Austria, but I'll just do it anyway. Okay. To expand on my idea, World War II is United Kingdom, authoritarian Russia, and Italy versus socialist Germany and France. If German socialists win civil war, and maybe Turkey and Hungary are more radical than French. It could be interesting, but then what happens with Poland, right? Have Yugoslavia keep the old name, the Kingdom of Serbia? Maybe there could be some interesting implications from that. But then by having that name, like the way that what happened with Yugoslavia, and I can show you this in maps. You see how the borders of this are kind of weird, based like and not really relevant to our modern day borders. And you'd see modern day borders. I don't even know where I'd show you that. Do I still have administrator map mode? No, it's just black. Where is the administrator map mode? Maybe I can show you a 1919 border. So 1919 compared to this. No, 1919 compared to this. So this was the Kingdom of Slovenes, Croats, and Serbs. This was... I don't know how to show you this with this, but you know Macedonia only... Northern Macedonia cuts off here, but the Macedonian Vardar is this big. It's because they were basing these borders based off of geographical regions and giving each of the names each of these provinces based off of a geographical feature. Like this was the Vojvodina maybe. this was Dalmatia, whatever. They were doing everything to avoid there being a Croatia period. Or a Slovenia period, or a Serbia period. They wanted to make a Yugoslav identity, and the way that they do that is by erasing the Croat, Slovene, and Serb one. So if you keep the Serb, Croat, Slovene thing, then you could have it like break apart along those lines. But I don't know. It is maybe. Denuzio succeeds in capturing Friuli for Italy. Maybe. What if France was fascist? Maybe. Germany should stay a democracy, and then they and Britain should be allies. Well, that sounds like Project Stressa. Wouldn't Islamic socialism in Turkey heavily influence the Middle East? It would. I'm not sure how it would, but it would. Assyrian social nationalist revolt in French Syria. Maybe. Poland and Czechoslovakia are friends. Then the status of tension, the Czechoslovak-Polish war, needs to be resolved differently. Maybe they aren't friends. Poland takes that part, and that's why Hungary still exists. But then, I don't know, Hungary, I think one of the determinations here is that Hungary's existence as a communist state is significantly implausible for many, many, many reasons. Even if Hungary managed to survive this, what's stopping Austria from attacking Hungary? All the treaties. Okay. Well, what about like all the white movements that are basically like, hey, I'll become your puppet state if you install me in Hungary? Like, I don't know. There's just so many reasons why. Persian Islamic Socialist Civil War. I mean, maybe, but like, how would the Gilan Soviet exist? I'm not too certain about that. I want to go back to regular chat now. Yugoslavia Civil War look featured in the borders. Okay, goodbye, Mango. So I'll just get back to cooking. Got some DMs, but that's from Sagat. I'm not looking at those right now. What else we got here? So there's an interesting thing here. Whether or not you have a communist Turkey, there was this idea that was had in the original negotiations of Sevres, and that was that Armenia, this big of an Armenia, would have been a Russian sphere of influence, or like a direct annexation. It then transformed to become this border also wouldn't exist. The weird divot of Azerbaijan. Honestly, like even Azerbaijan existing is a little odd. Not because they don't deserve a nation, but it's like how would it have happened? Baku was primarily Russian back in the day, right? There was a active effort by the Soviets to encourage the de-Russification of this area. Also, this little doohickey, I don't know where that would go, but I am going to delete it because I don't know. But after it turned out that Russia was in a civil war, the British still wanted there to be a Armenia there to balance things out between the way that they were going to partition Turkey. They just needed another benefactor. So then Britain went to America and was like, hey, do you want to be the leader of the Mandate of Armenia? And they sent a general over there to determine whether or not that would actually be feasible. He determined it wouldn't be feasible. But wouldn't it be funny if they did? International Straits Zone. So this is a way for the Americans or any other Western power to ship supplies over to Armenia. Or if they were friends with Azerbaijan and they wanted the oil there, which they absolutely would, everyone would want the oil here, they would then get the oil and then export it through here. And oh, Azerbaijan gets all the benefit. Well, why would they, right? Like, why wouldn't a Western country then invest into the oil fields and then get their money that way, right? Give it to Iran. That's a possibility. But if you give it to Iran, then it's like, if you give it to Iran, then the British just get the oil because of the British Iranian Oil Company. But that is a good point, and that is worth considering. Iranian. Oh no, notes, and then we do a bright, obnoxious pink color. Having it be Iranian, maybe. I can see the British doing that to try to avoid Russian dominance here. Like, why wouldn't the West see this as an opportunity to get a bunch of resources? United States of Armenia, the Liberia of the Caucasus, yeah. Left-leaning France most likely supported Turkey. How would Greece react if their major continental ally no longer being aligned? They would go to Russia. The historical and religious ties of Greece to Russia, and the fact that the international zone is being occupied by the West, and the fact that you can even have Yugoslavia be a part of this, could mean that Greece becomes a Russian ally in the coming war. And they could go Megali. In fact, they have already accomplished some of Megali. And as you can tell, Greece did benefit. What is going on? Are these separate colors? These are separate colors. Isn't that crazy? You can't really tell. But they're different colors. So we have a Greece here. Greece would... Greece, through their ability to get supplies through the Black Sea due to this mistake, I guess, of the West, from Rostov to whatever port this is, the Greeks would be able to get support. They would actually have a good reason, especially if Italy owns roads, which they still would. Right? It's all those islands, right? Italy would still own roads. And the British would still own Cyprus. There you go. Like, Greece being a Russian ally in this timeline makes a lot of sense. Plus, Greece having a port in the Black Sea means Greece can give an option for supply. Yes. Azerbaijan was home for Turkish and Pan-Turkish. They would want to establish a republic in Iran if they'd been annexed. But then, yeah, that's the ain't that the conflict that you would want, right? Like, that there's the conflict. So then you have. And if they're pan-Turkic, like, even if we don't go with Turkey being communist and instead some sort of rabid Turkish nationalism, then they would go east, and that would benefit anti-British forces, because then the oil that Britain would be getting would then be hampered. So then Turkey has a natural benefactor. Now I'm starting to think that Turkey shouldn't be communist. And then the French bloc then becomes like radical social democrat, Menshevik, and so much of a difference between British conservatism that they aren't going to be friends, even if it would benefit them strategically to do so. I wanna check the my DMs quickly. Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Thanks for that. But Albania existing and having Italian influence and protectorate-ish also would still make sense in this timeline. So we'll have that. Albania, and we're going to inherit something from another timeline here. Other timelines. Our timeline. Select all Britain. And alt it all the way up here. And then we have Britain. So that's all Britain mapped. That's easy. Azerbaijan lose more territory to Armenia, like Karabakh, and make Azerbaijan and Turkey nationalists. They could unite to crush Armenia. Yeah, you know what? That I actually kind of like that. I think that makes sense. And then the Americans having a mandate there, but then deciding not to get involved or whatever, because like how even would they? Makes sense. Or like American Civil War, haha. Hoi 4 mod has American Civil War funny. Then they divide up this. Maybe Georgia has a problem there. Then Russia goes, how do we handle this situation? Then they have an opportunity to intervene. That all makes sense to me. But what I want to do is I want to finish mapping out Europe. So I'm going to, from what I understand, everything else is pretty our timeline. So I want to quickly get this selection for the Italian colony of Libya. And I'm going to ignore the weird panhandle thingy. This is just for my own sake of mind. I'm going to go back down to our timeline. I'm going to pick Spain. I'm going to pick Switzerland. I'm going to pick Weimar Republic. And I also need Belarus. I mean, not Belarus. I need Belgium and the Netherlands. Can't find it. Belgium. I saw you for a second. Belgium. But where's the Netherlands? I have to find it. Come on. Oh, whatever. I'll do it this way. Oh, shoot. I lost my selection. Womp womp. I'll just alt click it up now. Okay, now I'm going to look for the other ones that I was missing. Portugal. That was way easier. I don't know why I didn't do this. There. Maybe I'll click that up. So if there's inconsistencies with the borders here, don't worry about that. That's like a difference between QBAMs. I'm gonna double check the Q&As here. Greece would go to Britain. No, I don't know if they would. Persian Islamo. Yeah, hold on. Who attacked the Polish in the Russian War first? The Russians did. Former Russian Black Sea Fleet could move to the Channel Zone because there's no appropriate ports on the Russian coast. Remember how Russia leased Ukrainian port Sevastopol? Okay. If Poland with Intermarium, would it be a stratocracy under Pilsudski and then after his death? Yeah, I think that's the idea there. There's like a power struggle there. You should give Adana to the Armenians. Are we doing American Armenia even though America didn't declare war on the Ottoman Empire? So the legal method of that would be that the League of Nations mandate is authorized by America. So yeah, then even if they didn't declare war on the Ottoman Empire, they'd still get it. I don't know where Adana is though. Or a Russian fleet to Armenia. Would they not be able to support a fleet here? Well, regardless, the Russian fleet would still exist. Why did Russia attack Poland first? They lost Central Asia in the Caucasus. That's a good question for Poland and their developer team. What about to rewrite Polish-German referendums within this time when Poland is much stronger? Yeah, somebody mentioned that a referendum that was going to Poland could have gone more in favor of Poland because Poland was in a war with the Soviets at the time. Would Basmachi movement seize Central Asia? Potentially. I don't know exactly what they're... I actually have pictures of it. So there's the Alash autonomy, which is part of Russia, Turkestan autonomy, and Transcaucasian. So it seems like they have it all, actually. These are just indirect protectorates here. But what's this? Armenian. I can't read what that. I can't read what that says. Republic of Turkey. Kurdistan here, yeah, that actually does make sense because they were supposed to have a plebiscite, but then if there's a Kurdistanish plebiscite, then what's happening with all this stuff? But then again, that's conflict. That's what we're here for. So, not too sure about that. Germany should stay a democracy, maybe. Who's in charge in Poland? Polish, Russian, Ukrainian borders might be different. I think it might be Pilduski. I'm not sure. Again, in the description of this live stream, you'll be able to find a Discord link that sends you to the chats here. Thank you for the super chat. Do you know who leads White Russia in this timeline? I want to call a friend. I got a super chat asking who leads Russia. Leader of the White Russia is a big point. Yeah, one thing that's important. I don't know what the lore is here, but there is a Transamur here. This could be a Japan intervening and then deciding just not to leave. That could be what happens there. I'm not entirely sure, but to quickly summarize this for people who are wondering what's going on here, because the Soviets weren't able to support the KMT or establish a united front, the Northern Expedition fails. So you have the, I don't know what the Beiyang clique, the Beiyang government still existing. I think that's what this yellow color is. Like if states are this yellow color, they're aligned with the Beiyang government, which is heavily influenced by Japan, hence why they have this huge area. Why are we having a Transamur when there's a White Russia victory? Because Japan wanted it, and because the way that Russia is, there could be an issue there. Savinkov leaves Russia. That if Savinkov Savinkov, not Savinkov. Yeah, I don't know who would be leading Russia. We did put Mikhail Dietrichs. Mikhail Dietrichs. This little boy. This little boyo. This guy's leading Russia. I don't know anything about this guy. Key figure in the monarchist white movement in Siberia in the Far East during the Civil War. Descended from Lutheran Sudeten German ancestors who became Baltic Germans. Whoa. A deeply religious man whose private railway coach were plastered with icons. He saw himself as waging a holy war against Bolshevik heathens. Interesting. So, is there going to be a monarchic restoration? In Transamur, the Japanese sending out the Russian fascists. Oh, okay. So I was suggesting that Russia be fascism and then have revisionism, but the Transamur is Japan setting up a fascist rival government. If this guy's the leader of Russia, then it would be like conservatism. I can still see Russia, Yugoslavia, and Greece forming a alliance between themselves, not for fascism's sake, but for their own like relations, like orthodoxy, and their shared history. Britain, the reason why Greece wouldn't be with Britain is because why didn't Britain let them have more, or Istanbul? But I don't know. Like maybe there's an agreement that Greece has Istanbul. It's just that the Russians would actually want to give it to them. Russians would be against Turkey, especially if they're communist. They would be fighting for influence over here. They would be able to be strong enough to push down. But then what's happening with this? If they're radical Republican, or potentially going socialist, then they could just dissolve this thing and give it to Turkey. Then Turkey suddenly going down and threatening the British, which is good for France. Italy wants this, so I need to do my. This is what I do eventually when I need to figure out stuff. First of all, I'm missing this weird border. I'm not going to touch that. And or is Finland Finnish borders? Oh, they are. I don't know what's happening with these Finnish borders. I imagine that Jaeger is happy with this and would be able to understand what's happening there a lot more than me. But we're going with those Finnish borders, and we're going with the our timeline, not that one. Go here, click these two, alt click back, alt drag up. And though, okay, so ignoring the incorrect borders in the east and the fact that there's no music. But now we need it way more quiet. Now what we do is we try to figure out the factions. So I'm gonna, instead of making it separate layers, I'm gonna do idea A. Then I'm going to highlight each nation and their thing. Pud just told me that Dietrich, the leader of Russia, dies in 1937, so that would lead to a power vacuum. And I'm not really looking at questions right now at the moment. So if you want to ask questions, check the live chat. And I'm not ending the Q&A because every time I ended a Q&A in the past, it would reset the chat, or there was something else going on with the chat that I don't understand. Anyway, let's look at this now. Hold on. Okay. So, Russia would be working with Greece. Would be working with Yugoslavia. Poland is very much anti-Russia. France would be, well, I don't know what France is trying to do in this situation. If France does the 180 and then starts being radical Republican, the color of Russia and Italy are too similar. I need to change this. No, Russia should be darker. Look at this. I gave Russia Corfu. Because the colors are so similar. Probably still a problem here, but whatever. That color barely changed. What is going on? Oh, it's because this. Yeah. So I'm gonna quickly undo that. So Russia would be working with Greece. Let's just say Greece for now. Just Greece. Poland would be working with these guys. I don't know what the Baltics would be doing. Britain would be... I don't know what Britain would be doing. Italy would want this, and Bulgaria. Romania would be caught between everywhere. France would have been here and here, but then having France fall to communism would be an inciting incident for them to change their foreign policy to then do this. I think this is really important for the balance of the scenario, especially with how Britain would be trying to keep status quo. They'd probably be the new benefactor of Armenia, or maybe the only benefactor of Armenia. They would be protecting Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. Um, um, Italy and Russia working together might work, and I think that might even be what Pud was initially thinking. Arturard? Yeah, I'll consider that. Finish Ingria too much? Maybe. Copies Red Flood by accident. I'm crying. How do I even do that? Jacques Doriot for Commie France? That'd be funny. Civil War and Journey makes them a wild card, basically. So for the factions map, I'm just going to do something silly and just disregard them entirely. Austria being a part of the Italian sphere makes sense. Czechoslovakia, then, because of no French benefactor becoming Russian, also makes sense. Romania being stuck between everybody and not having a way out is interesting and could allow them to go any direction. So I want to make them gray. This is the neutral but could go any way state. I don't know if Russia would have ambitions against this, but they would definitely have ambitions against Finland, I feel. Red World, but the European communists realize the Middle East communists have very different ideas on communism. I actually really don't know much about Red Flood. Like, I need to look at it now. What's Red Flood? Wait for it. I have heard many a not so savory thing about the Red Flood, so I tend to avoid it. But let's look at what Red Flood is. So Intermarium, Greek communism, German communism. I know that these people are weird. These people are normal. A few may exist and could go here, and that they're part of the French system. Don't know what's happening here. UK is normal, I think. I think there might be a huge American Civil War, because of course there is. Russia is like a warlordy, but they wouldn't be warlordy. Zeltorussia wouldn't exist. How is this copying Red Flood? Like, really? I'm a little frustrated by that accusation. Is it because... who knows? I am sure I'm not copying Red Flood. This doesn't... I don't see how there's any similarity. Attempt at pan-Arabism. Yeah, but like, who would be benefacting it? Turkish communism? I think that the thing is that Turkish communists would still be Turkish. Having a huge Arabic state promise is why Turkey fell apart in the first place. Their viewpoint on how the Middle East should be reorganized would not involve a pan-Arabic state. There is still potential for a pan-Arabic state, but I don't know. Britain seems to be like having a ball in the Middle East. Like, they don't... British colonialism, yes. This isn't... Yeah, this is not copying Red Flood. The thing about Red Flood I'm talking about is that there's actually two separate wars that make World War II. Oh, come on. Germany versus France, and then other... But that's not... I guess, but I don't know. Like, I was worried that you were talking about other things. Current journey plan, Civil War, but it's like fascists, communists, and Democrats, I think, are the main fashions. Russia backs pan-Arabism. I don't know if they would be that galaxy brain to do that when they're like really orthodox. But if they're working against Britain, I can see that. But why would they work against Britain? Right, because they're backing Greece against the International Strait Zone. Because Russia wants all that. They see their support of Poland in the beginning as a affront. The Great Game is still going on. Russia has indirect control over the Central Asia, but then that could be contested by the British. They could get an Arabic puppet, like if they get down south enough, maybe. Would the Intermarium and Italy make a temporary alliance? Well, like, in what circumstance would they? Why would Italy want to go fight Russia? When the Intermarium is going to have a fracturing itself in the beginning, I don't see how Italy would benefit from that. Like, maybe if the Intermarium beats Russia, they could then align and then face against the French. But actually, I think that France becoming communist after the game starts, I think solves a lot of the issues of the scenario. It gives opportunities for France to then have a reason to be aggressive with places like Spain and Italy, when otherwise they would be trying to do peaceful politicking. Having a German civil war at the same time and having them back communists would then mean that they get a communist ally and then continue their path in pan-European communism. The Democrats in Germany would then be able to be supported by Britain as a status quo. The nationalists in Spain, again, status quo. Portugal would already be a part of this British order. I'll just put Spain here too. Britain could have the opportunity to negotiate with Italy. Potentially be like, look, maybe I was wrong. Maybe you should have had all those territories in the Treaty of London. That's fine. And you know what? As an added bonus, I'll give you land off of France too. So it's looking like Britain and Italy are going to be more friends. But that's just a potential. There could be other ways that it goes. Imperial Federation? Well, there wouldn't be the impetus for Imperial Federation because the Imperial Federation was only started before World War I started. If you have the Imperial Federation succeeding early to the point where it exists in 1936, you would need to avoid the British entering the World War at all. The British could still be going for an Imperial Federation, but it wouldn't happen at the start. And having that be a thing is just like whether or not you choose to add it as a path for the game is up to the mod developers, but I wouldn't have that at the start of the game. Yeah, the communists in Breslau, yeah. UK, Portugal together forever as God intended, yeah. Spain should be communist and aligned with France. Spain civil war for them to then be aligned with France. Like have a content there. Have France straight up invade Spain. Why not, right? Then France guarantees Hungary, guarantees Turkey. France would want Turkey to take the international straits so that France can have more freedom here. France would want Greece to fall, and Turkey, using weird Ottoman claims or geographical concerns, could do that. Not necessarily saying that Turkish communists could be pan-Ottoman and trying to annex Greece, but they're right there, and they could do that for the alliance. I'm not sure what would happen with the Caucasus yet. It almost feels like Georgia should be a part of the Intermarium because of the Promethean ideal. And in that same way, actually, Promethean ideal having the Finnish be a part of it. And you know what? Maybe the Baltic states too. Why not? Then you have containment against Russia, which is always the point of the Intermarium. And France backing that until they don't is a really good way to get the geographical conflict started. So I'm gonna start pulling up the notes. Where do I have the notes here? Note boxes. Okay. So Lord Dad notes: have France be socialist, then have them go full communist somehow. To be the main destabilizer in the post-war Great War conflict. German Civil War happens in inspiration, so too Spain. France revokes guarantees and support for former cordon sanitaire. Russia then intervenes. Poland has civil war. Russia maybe intervenes at this point. No guarantees / support for Hungarian communism means war with Romania. Romania then needs to pick side. Alignment could be determined by Straits access or connection with Russia. Greece is Russia's candidate for Straits. Turkey is France's. Balkan War predicates the World War II just like the Polish, German, and Spanish civil wars. Georgia's aligned with France because they're commie? Yeah, maybe. That could be interesting. Also, Russia owns Crimea. Well, that's something they can fight about, huh? Communist Helleno-Turkism, potentially. Crimea willingly joined Ukraine. Yeah, I don't want to be talking about like Crimea and who joined what and why. You do feel like Russia is really weak here. I agree, which is why I'm kind of trying to give them the little entente. In fact, I would probably make Romania Russian. So then Russia's like the new like order stabilizer of the East, who then has to fight France. So if Russia beats the Intermarium and the British are fighting the French, then the Russians and British have a reason to be friends. Then they take it out, but then they have a Cold War, the Second Great Game or whatever. The Italians could also, well, no, it seems like the Italians and the Russians are having direct conflict. There's a lot of ways that this could go. World War II could be manifested in several different ways. Armenia would collapse and only 30% of them would be Armenian? Yes. And the people who would be in Armenia running the show there would be very angry and would be like trying to get revenge for the Armenian of whatever year. It would not be a fun time there. It's basically a road bump. I don't think many people would be upset in the international community, especially the people who are trying to like hold Armenia back, if Turkey took over Armenia. But it sounds crazy to say. Maybe I regret saying that, but like I've heard things about how there were some Armenian legionaries who were being told not to go hurt people for no reason, and they couldn't be told no, and the French had to like distance themselves. There's a reason why the American guy, when they went to Armenia, his report back was like, it's so sensitive here about what happened here that it's like not a good idea for us to even get involved, right? Wait, what is this money? Insert ad? Add stream marker. I'm just picking. There's a button to get an ad. I could have done that when I was getting... What? Oh my god. I don't know how long I've been doing this and I haven't clicked those buttons before. That's crazy. Russian enclave in Sebastopol. How about instead of a commie France, France is just normal and a Russian ally? If France is normal, then France would be friends with Britain because of how close they are and their shared history of the Entente. Without a strong Germany or Italy, because Italy isn't very strong, to contest the world order, then you don't have a World War II. If you have France be radical and attempting to disrupt the world in a unique way compared to others, I feel like that makes more sense. It's not a bad idea, but you're trying to find a way to leverage Russia. Well, having Poland have a civil war and then have a way for them to attack them and then gain their industry resources, connections with the rest of the world, the French losing their little entente and then Russia taking the little entente, making a big Eurasia, still having an industry problem, then facing a big war with the French industry and the French and German industries, getting like a big like push all the way back to the Stalin line or whatever, like kind of like our World War II, and then coming back when the British decide to finally attack France. I think that's a pretty good way to set up a World War II in this situation. Pud just messaged me. Here's the Civil War map. The tags are placeholders. The Prussia tag is the right-wing coalition. The Germany tag is the remnants of the Republicans. Chinese Soviet tag, which is obviously a placeholder, is the Socialist Coalition. The Bavaria tag is a temporary Bavarian state which would rejoin, just kind of like a neutral thing. Yeah. Yugoslavia tag, Rhine government upheld by France. Okay, so I'm gonna copy this over. I'm gonna save the text that I just did. I'm gonna go to the Hearts of Iron 4 visuals thing. No, that's the wrong one. Copy image. Copy image. Oh my god, that took forever. So Prussia is the Republican, is the right wing. German Republic is the Republican leftovers. This is a government set up by France. Make this the French communists, right? Like that's with my new perspective, that's how I would do it. Again, up to them whether or not they do that. Proxy wars in the Balkans. France versus Italy. Romania could be legionary. Having a like black spot of Europe, Romania fascism when no one else in the world is really fascist is pretty interesting to me. A militarist Russia would be a protector of Mongolia. Yes, even if Roman Ungern von Sternberg does not have a lot of influence there, Russia would have a lot of influence in Mongolia, and that's an entire component of it, especially because the Japanese are propping up a thing here. They would have the Mongolians as a satellite state. They would have a reason to fight Japan. They would work with China in some capacity. That's all accounted for. Let's do the gnarliest sneeze, and you just barely avoided it. Is Italy under Yes Man? I actually don't know. I was advocating for it, and then people pointed out that it was kind of lame, and then I kind of accepted that and ignored it and moved on. But it doesn't really matter if Italy is Yes Man or not. They don't have to be, but they could be. The geographical ambitions would be the exact same, right? Don't sneeze. I should have thought of that. Oh man, I just shouldn't sneeze. That'd make my life so much easier. I wouldn't need to sneeze if I just stopped sneezing. You're so right. Still against France being communist. Yes, you heard me say it 7 times. You see the country to be Italy. Italy isn't strong enough to revise the world order. It would look prettier because then you have an Italy here who's allied with Hungary and Bulgaria, and they don't have any clashing claims, and then also Turkey. But like it's the same thing but a little different. And then what is France doing? Just sitting here? Then Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Romania are all French. Hungary, whatever. Czechoslovakia, all these countries, they're really strong. France is really strong. It just doesn't work in my opinion. I want to double check the questions chat to see. USA lose the Civil War, so America's not always the same shit. It just me to see so many people wanting to change Britain. Yeah, I already replied that. What's the point of divergence of the scenario? Soviets lose the war because a general dies. Great game 2.0. Yeah, it could be interesting. Just a minute, hold on. Yeah, I think that's. Oh, you keep saying like, just some random Brit. I'm getting crazy seeing the exact same message in different chats, and it makes me think that I'm in the wrong chat or something. Whatever. The French communists are freaks. Yes. America lose the Civil War. Which Civil War? Like the Civil War from the 1860s? That's too much of a point of divergence. That's okay. I was just, my mind was being completely blown. You could, yeah, I know you didn't. It's fine. Fiume, Italy could work. But then, like, Fiume, Italy is basically progressive fascist Italy, and that sounds insane to somebody who hasn't researched Fiume. Look up the Fiume Regency. The stuff that was going on there is insane. In the 1919s, you had like yoga being taught to legionnaires and karate being taught to legionnaires. Literally the stuff that we have in our modern day of the Western world. Like, it was actually just, it started there. It's so interesting to see. It's not that everything in our modern world comes from Fiume. It's just that the society changed at a much faster rate due to the fact that they were being revolutionary. Okay, so I think I'm going to try to find a way to solidify all of my thoughts here. Georgia being either intermarium or being French communist either way could work. Russia getting involved everywhere to try to revise everything might be too much for Russia. I think the biggest, most important thing is them getting the Polish somehow neutralized, or in their sphere, whatever you want to call it, so that they can connect with Czechoslovakia, whatever, and then get involved more in the next coming wars. Romania could, like, the Little Entente could just take Russia in, and then they would just fight the Intermarium, and that would be like phase 1, right? France would be trying to take out Spain, Germany, and Italy, basically. Russia could go with Italy. Britain could go with Italy. It's likely that Britain and Italy are allies. So I might even just change that right now. Could be that Italy and Britain become allies, and the easier way to do that is to avoid fascist Italy at all, but regardless. And then you have this. So you have the Little Entente coming in and having Russia. Then you have the British and Russians potentially fighting over influence of the Balkans, but most likely the French and them fighting. I think that this faction setup makes a lot of sense. And then having Germany be a wild card is another really important thing too. There's some Japanese guy in Fiume. Yeah, that guy was teaching karate. He was the karate sensei. Spanish Civil War, Communist France, Fascist Italy, Republic Britain. Yeah, that too. So maybe we don't do that. I'm not entirely sure, but it could go either way. Italy could go. Italy doesn't have any. No. We're going with what I initially thought, because there's no. Russia and Italy don't have any collaborative opportunity. Britain and France do. Britain and Italy do against France. But at the same time, if the Intermarine beat Russia, then the Little Entente has no benefactor. They could go, they would just fall to Italy. So Italy would need to be a separate faction, and depending on how the Intermarium conflict goes, then Italy goes with Britain, or they don't go with Britain and they go with Intermarium or something. Spanish Civil War is a canon event? Yeah. So, oops. I'm gonna use this other text box here. Does it even have a text box here? Here. Okay. No, come on. No. Hey. No. Bad text box. What is going on here? It's so insane. Whatever. Who cares? Okay. Italy. Oh my god. Italian faction with or without Romania. Probably without. Either join the Intermarium or Britain, depending on if the Intermarium beat Russia. France is trying to pan-European communist style. France getting naval invaded or just invaded by Britain makes sense. Then Russia gets involved somehow, and that's World War II. I'm like, the notes there are pretty straightforward, like kind of simple, and this might have already been the goal, but if I were to approach this scenario, this is how I would do it. France keeping the order until they decide not to. Germany has a civil war, they get involved. Spain gets a civil war, they get involved. Or it's just a British ally and they just invade it. Italy is like, what am I doing? Hey, the Little Entente is free. Let me go in on them. Oh shit, they're actually being guaranteed by Russia, maybe. Maybe the Little Entente is its own faction, and then if Russia beats the Intermarium, then whatever. Intermarium could even become part of the Little Entente and then fight Italy. There's a lot of things that they could determine here, but having it be segmented like this, like France is doing this, Italy's doing this, Poland and Russia are fighting each other here, Britain is trying to keep it all together, but eventually there only can be two factions by the time a Cold War starts. Less crazy red flood. It feels like every time I make a timeline, people just say it's less crazy red flood. They said that about Spartacus, and even though we don't have a communist Germany, it's like, oh, it's less red flood. Like, why is it always red flood, man? Unrelated question: why would Greece get Northern Epirus? Greco-Turkish War and Greece in favors. I don't know. I think that it was like Italy wanted Albania to be this big and then have influence over Albania, and they were trying to keep Italy friendly on good terms. So I'm not entirely sure. I know you didn't say that. I said Paulina said it, and in another way, Gug said it. I think they meant it in different ways. This timeline just seems like a more crazy art timeline. Yeah, this timeline reminds me of that dream I had last night, where blah 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 blah. Like, it's like this timeline reminds me of a timeline I saw on the Lore Dad channel. Yeah. Okay, my voice is getting horsey. I'm getting tired. I think that this is a good point. I think this is a good way for the developers of Aquila, Renata, like a good place for them to end. I'm going to make my own invitation. And I'm going to post it in here. So any more questions or suggestions for the timeline, definitely go to that Discord link. That's the public channel for Aquila Renata. Thank you again for Pud for keeping me updated on what the idea with the scenario was, letting me give critique and suggestions in a stream like this. I think that this direction, I think that doing more like creative, exciting, like inciting things is more fun, because like it avoids the whole like negativity potential of looking at a dead mod and disagreeing with a decision, and instead it being like I get to choose which people I work with. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling at this point, but this was good, and I'm looking forward to potentially doing another LoreStarter stream. So thank you everybody for tuning in and for your comments. There's a lot of engagement. It was really hard for me to keep up, but I think it was a good stream. Yeah, not much else to say, but best of luck to Pud and their team, and everybody be nice. Okay, I'm gonna let the music play for a bit and then end the stream. Thank you, everyone. Okay, I'll actually end stream now. Don't worry. But where's the faction thing? I want to hide that. Come on. There. Ignoring the terrible border. But yeah, thank you everyone. Goodbye.